Welcome to the 8th Annual Symposium on Wildness, Wilderness, and the Imagination. This is our kickoff reading. Really pleased to bring Amy Nezum-Kumatatil to campus, and she's going to be introduced by one of our grad students in the MFA program, Janice Rogers. And if you could please silence your cell phones. I also want to emphasize that there is no greater compliment to a writer than buying their book and asking for an autograph within it. So they are for sale just beyond that doorway, and I hope you'll stick around to talk to Amy afterwards. There will also be a Q&A session to follow. So as you're sitting here, try to maybe sketch out some pressing questions you might have for her. So with that said, Janice, take it away.
Okay, again, welcome everyone to our Wildness Symposium. So this afternoon I have the fortune of introducing Amy Nezum-Kumatatil, who comes to us from the State University of New York at Fredonia, where she is Associate Professor of English. She teaches creative writing and environmental literature. Amy has 3 poetry collections, all of which received numerous awards and accolades. Her first, Miracle Fruit, won the Tupelo Press Poetry Prize, Forward Magazine's Book of the Year Award, the Global Filipino Award, among many other acknowledgments. At the Drive-In Volcano, won the Balcones Prize, and her most recent collection, which we'll be hearing some of this afternoon, Lucky Fish, was published just last year and won the gold medal in poetry from the Independent Publisher Book Awards and the Eric Hoffer Grand Prize for Independent Books. Some of her recent honors, some of which Jen already described if you were here for the panel earlier, include a poetry fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Pushcart Prize. The poems of Lucky Fish take us around the country and abroad. We see 100 Islands National Park in the Philippines. We see her grandmother's house in Kerala, India, where we can almost smell her grandmother's cinnamon plants and imagine the preparation of fish wrapped and steamed in a single banana leaf and wish we could stay for dinner. Last night, Amy was telling me about how everyone thinks their grandmother's food and cooking is the best and how her grandmother's really is the best. And based on her writing, I think I could believe her. Dorian Lau has said, "Here is a poet willing to praise the earth, the animals, the mud and its confusion, as well as the human sleep-sloppy mouths. These are sensual dreamscapes of allegory and fable, but with a righteous bite and the razor sting of perception." In a recent poetry workshop here at Iowa State that I'm taking this semester, we got the chance to read Lucky Fish, and our class collectively really admired the way Amy's poems embrace life's chaos. Her voice is jubilant with a sense of wonder that creates a landscape that's entirely new to her readers. And we were just talking before that we're really glad that Birth Geographic made it into that collection. It's a poem that we all really loved, so we were glad that was in there. So with that, please welcome Amy.
Thank you so much, Janice and Ben, and Iowa State, the Cyclones, for hosting me. This is the first time I've seen the sun, I kid you not, in about 6.5 days, so I know you guys planned that just for me, so thank you very much. In Buffalo, we don't get much sun in the month of February, as you can imagine. I'm going to start off, I'm going to read from actually all 3 of my collections, and I'm going to start off with one. It's actually one of my favorite writing assignments, and I know because none of you are going to be going home to watch the Oscars. You're going to be staying here, and even if you are to go home, you have nothing else better to do than to go online and check out this site called thephobialist.com. What it is, it's a treasure trove of writing ideas. So I don't believe in writer's block. I always get irritated when my students say, I don't know what to write, that kind of thing. But if you do fall on that, I would say check out this website, thephobialist.com. I'm the daughter of a retired psychiatrist, and so what this is, my mom had volumes of these at home, hard copy, but now, for your convenience, it's online, all the diagnosed phobias that have ever been documented around the world. So you've got things like the fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth, papophobia, the fear of the Pope, the fear of bald people, just all kinds of phobias. So as I always try to do the writing exercises along with my students, you can either write from the point of view of somebody who has this phobia or just write about the phobia itself, and I chose the latter. And this one is called, I always stumble over it, it's hepatomonstроsis kepedalophobia, which is the fear of long words. And the longest word in the Oxford English Dictionary, I actually did include it here, so I will stumble on that as well, so just FYI. On the first day of classes, I secretly beg my students, don't be afraid of me. I know my last name on your semester schedule is chopped off or probably misspelled or both. I can't help it. I know the panic of too many consonants rubbed up against each other, no room for vowels to fan some air into the room of a box marked instructor. You want something to really startle you? Try tapping the ball of roots of a potted tomato plant into your cupped hand one spring, only to find a small black toad who kicks his cold eye at you and the sun. Be afraid of the x-rays for your teeth or lung, and pray for no dark spots. You may have pneumono-ultra microscopic silicovolcanoconiosis or cold lung. Be afraid of money spiders tiptoeing across your face while you sleep on a sweet, fat couch. But don't be afraid of me, my last name, what language I speak, or what accent dulls itself on my molars. I promise I will tell jokes. I promise I will help you see the gleam of the beak of a mohawked cockatiel. I will lecture on luminescent sweeps of ocean full of tiny dinoflagellates oozing green light when disturbed. I promise dark gatherings of toadfish and comical shrimp just when you think you are all alone in this class, hoping to stay somehow afloat. During the session with Dan a little bit earlier, we talked about kind of some beginnings of our writing, or what we kind of read growing up, that kind of thing. And I mentioned I didn't really kind of read poetry, and I didn't read really literature. I was reading medical textbooks and then just kind of processing the folk tales from India and the Philippines that my parents gave us before bedtime. One of the folk tales that my mother, the said psychiatrist, would talk about right before bed was her favorite flower, which is now my favorite flower, and it's called the corpse flower. When I last lived in Madison, Wisconsin, actually, it was the first time that a corpse flower ever bloomed in America. It's usually found in Southeast Asia. Did you know this, Dean? Did you see the corpse flower when you were there? Yeah. Dean was in Madison the same time I was. Anyway, I was very pleased to see that there was a line for Dave Matthews tickets and a line for the corpse flower that day. And I was very pleased with humanity to see the line for the corpse flower was actually longer than the line for Dave Matthews tickets. And so, at any rate, it's a very big kind of occurrence. Those of you who are musical buffs, The Little Shop of Horrors was based on this plant. You're not supposed to own it, essentially, and you'll see why. Here, this is called the corpse flower. So keep in mind, this is like a bedtime story designed to help us sleep. The corpse flower. And when the farmer saw the giant flower with a smell like bad fish and bad sugar, he could not look away. The purple skirt of the bloom begged him to return. And so he did, with a pail of water, and sang to it and caressed it and swiped beetles away from the blossom's lip. He even gave it a name, and when the farmer said the name out loud, the flower began to move, and then completely devoured him. Villagers searched and searched for the farmer. When they too stumbled upon the large blossom, they decided to name it after a beautiful jaguar that once killed several children. But this flower does not want to be named, does not want to be owned. When the flower heard the name, it stretched to the closest villager and ate her, ate the name as well. So that gave me all kinds of fun dreams growing up. I live in a very small town in Western New York, where very often it's kind of a slow news day, thankfully. And it's a very, very small town, so much so that so in our daily newspaper, the Dunkirk Observer, the main lead story of this paper was that it was a kind of a reminder to everybody that it was your last chance to get your high school picture retaken. That was the lead, and there was a whole article on it. So that's what I mean when it's a slow news day in my town. It's a very slow news day. And so I just love that concept. And the title of this poem is called High School Picture Retake Day. I don't know if any of you had needed this day. The reason why it resonated with me is because I always had to do this. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Like, your pictures would come out whack for whatever reason, and then you had one final chance to kind of redeem yourself, that kind of thing. That was me all the time, always. High School Picture Retake Day. When an octopus becomes stressed, it chomps its arms one by one until it becomes a floaty salad. The line of students here is understandably worried. This is the last chance for redemption. Neil parts and parts his hair with the petite plastic comb the photographer slipped him when he signed in, and Susie reties her headband. Everyone here is quiet but for the tiny songs of tiny combs whistling through hair. Everything here is black except for the single camera lamp and smudgy backdrop painted to look like the student hovers among beige and blue clouds. And maybe they are, the ones who got it right the first time, I mean, soaring above the Earth's troposphere, but still a little bit below the stratosphere. When the last bell rings, there they are, flying proud, able to exchange wallet-sized pictures with other pretty people right away. No waiting for 2 months when nobody cares anymore. No closed eyes, no sticks of hair sprung out like arrows, no bra strap showing, no sleepy eyes, just perfectly pressed shirts and smiles slit to show rows and rows of neat teeth. My eighth or ninth grade year, we had kind of, and again, this is a very, very still small town, we had kind of a record number of suicides in our high school. And for a small town, we had 3 suicides in 1 year. So it was kind of really difficult to kind of process, and it was a very, very strange year to say the least. And this kind of, this poem kind of comes out of that. It was a very strange assignment that we were all given just this week. They didn't change it up or anything. And it was so they didn't change up the biology kind of assignments, and it was all dissections. So it was, you can imagine, it made for a very macabre kind of week and month, that kind of thing. You would think, hey, this happened, let's change up, let's, I don't know, study about cells fusing together or something, that kind of thing. But we started with this little worm called planaria. The best part of biology class wasn't the frogs, the white clammy bellies split open, or the fetal pig eyes, cloudy blue shooter marbles. It wasn't when we held a cow's fatty heart, heavy with dead blood in our trembling hands. It couldn't compare to the giant hissing roaches scrambling along the sides of our homemade cardboard maze. The best part was the unit on worms. Before we pinned earthworm against crusty blue rubber trays to count the hearts, find the tiny pearls of ganglia, and pinch out its last meal of soil from its crop, there was the worm called planaria. A flatworm, simple and slow in its petri dish, see-through under light and our mini red scopes. We had to cut off their heads with a razor blade, some their tails, while they were still alive. I'd feel sick with this murderous business, and I'd come to school early to check their progress and doubted my teacher's promise of regeneration. Snow drifted into tiny diagonal mounds against our classroom window, and sure enough, like the crocus pushing purple through dank mulch when we least expect it, My planaria finally grew another head, the other piece, another tail, to form 2 whole new worms. Their eye spots were a bit whiter now, as if to add brighter lights to the celebration. Kelly Felt's planaria grew not 1, but 5 new heads. And that year we were 14, surrounded by so much death, until planaria saved us. So much vim and vigor, so much nerve. I'm a child of the 80s, and so my friends would kind of always make fun of me. The usual 80s heartthrobs of, I don't know, Kirk Cameron, Ricky Schroeder, that kind of thing. Mine wasn't any one of those. And so I always have to kind of preface this when I say this poem. There used to be, some of you may not realize this, but I swear it's true, there used to be a whole drama on TV called The Incredible Hulk. It wasn't a cartoon, but it was a drama with Bill Bixby as the scientist Bruce Banner. Bill Bixby was my childhood crush. So that kind of thing. So when I say The Incredible Hulk, I don't want you to picture the CGI kind of monstrosities that have been out. This was an actual TV show. I mean, it was up for an Emmy Award, if you could believe that. It seems kind of amazing now that there would be an Incredible Hulk show on TV and people would watch it. Anyway, this is called What I Learned from the Incredible Hulk. I learned when it comes to clothes, make an allowance for the unexpected. Make sure the spare in the trunk of your station wagon with wood paneling isn't in need of repair. A simple jean jacket says, hey, if you aren't trying to smuggle rare Incan coins through this peaceful little town and kidnap the local orphan, I can be one heck of a mellow kind of guy. But no matter how angry a man gets, a smile and a soft stroke on his bicep can work wonders. I learned that male chests also have nipples, warm and established, and I learned that green doesn't always mean envy. It's the meadows full of clover and chicory the Hulk seeks for rest, a return to normal. And sometimes a woman gets to go with him, correcting his rumpled hair and the cuts in his hand. Green is the space between water and sun, cover for a quiet man, each of his ribs shuttling drops of liquid light. You folks are looking, you don't know this, but you're looking at history here. I was the first female football mascot of my high school, which in the early, at that time, that was kind of a groundbreaking thing. It was always male basketball players in the off-season being the mascot. And I fought to kind of get this position. There was tryouts, and we had one of those, kind of giant high schools in Ohio that football was kind of just this giant deal. So it was a huge secrecy. Everybody at tryouts had to sign away, like, you can't reveal who the mascot is. But it was a very weird kind of situation because people thought these were basketball players. I would have girls come up to me being like, hey guy, that kind of thing, and try to, like, let's meet after the game, that kind of thing. And so finally they put a bow on my head, just to, whatever floats your boat, but just as long as you know that there's a woman inside. So the key is, I'm very, very proud of this, as you could tell still, but the thing is my high school was called Beaver Creek High School. So you can imagine our mascot, yes, you guys know, was the battling beaver. So this is one of the few persona poems I've ever written. This is called The Mascot of Beaver Creek High Finally Breaks Her Silence. There are some suits more difficult to remove. Spades, armor, tweed in the summer. Those nights you thought I was home, dateless, studying for chemistry, memorizing the dates of epic battles. I was working myself into a lather of sweat for a field of angry young men. Sometimes they were so close I could feel their hot breath in the space between my head and furry neck. Even the captain of the cheerleaders never went that far. Every hand that once reached for me still haunts me at the most unexpected times, as I place vegetables on the grocery belt or walking the glow wall walkway at the Detroit airport. Something still pulls me to the ground, and it's not the crowd, it's not the scent of cola and popcorn, it's not the tinge of engine grease or a truck revving at homecoming. If you slice a jacaranda bloom between two glass slides and place it on a microscope, the corolla will always fight for the light. If you once posed for any pictures with me and still have them scattered somewhere in an attic, look carefully at the dark netting of my mouth. If you squint hard, you can see my actual teeth clenched into a small scream. I was like that every night. It was high school, after all. I was always cheering for something, and I still am. Something is always worth cheering for. There is always some cheer worth something. Cheer for some worth, always. I dedicate this poem to one of my former students, great student. When we first started, we always clashed. No matter what I said, she would kind of go, just do her own thing. And she ended up going to Michigan. She was my first my first student to ever go to an MFA program, so I'm especially proud of her. But her deal was, with simile, she would always use as anything for the second part of the simile. So it would be like, she's fast as anything, heavy as anything, angry as anything, dry as anything. And I'd be like, no, Jennifer, we don't know what that is, that kind of thing. So in her honor, I'm calling this Suddenly as Anything. One of my students uses this to describe the way a person leaves the room, and I circle it with a question mark, and I scribble "too vague" with my red pen. During my snowy walk home, I bury my nose into my already damp scarf, wonder if I'm a bad teacher, and how the student could possibly miss the whole point of my metaphor lecture, and I wonder if this ice won't give just a little bit for my boots. But the more I think about it, the more I think genius. For who hasn't vanished without so much as a trace of waxy lip prints on a glass, not even leaving a single stray hair on the back of a chair? Sometimes disappear means leave quickly so I don't feel your absence. Carpenter ants don't even shake one last message to their beloved queen before they crawl away into a smooth piece of driftwood and set sail for new shores. And when he drove away last winter, I avoided looking at the ground for days so I would not find an imprint of his shoe. And maybe what my student meant is that anything could be lost, even the good things. A ring juicy with rubies, a new spaniel pup, an orange so fat its segments beg to be unfolded like a blossom in your hand. And even when the chara plant, the world's first known underwater vegetation, suddenly disappeared from this planet, it gave no warning, never even feigned a withering of its bubbly leaves, its hardy stems curling in and around bedrock, brushing the scales of mysterious striped fish until its very last day. How should I say this? I'm just going to read it. This is called Coco Cay. At Coco Cay, I snorkel close to the buoys that mark where they are not responsible for you anymore, and I find myself in a school of blue and gold skipjack fish. Nothing but luminous fish color, small bits of ocean, and the skipjacks here surround me, don't budge until I kick my flippers. Will they be brave enough to kiss me? They're known as kissing fish, pressing their swollen blue lips to each other, a wall of clams, and aquarium glass. A kite-shaped shadow flies into focus a couple of yards away. It's easy to recognize the raised slide, the undulation of wing over a helpless line of shrimp. I panic. I flipper my way back to shore until I'm within shouting distance. But the tiny red seahorses glide in and out of the coral shrubs, and I want one to curl its ribbed tail around my finger, a mermaid's ring. The next time I press my hand on my love, he would feel the gallop, the Calvary's hair, every neigh and wild whip of hair. One day when I was teaching at Fredonia, I checked my email real quick, went off to teach, came back, and there was something like 143 messages, which is not that unusual over maybe the span of a few days, but this was just within the span of an hour, so I wondered what is going on. I still don't actually know what happened because nobody ever gave me the heads up, but apparently somebody was teaching my book, my first book, in a high school class, and was teaching Walt Whitman, I think, at the same time, and apparently this teacher gave out my work email, and apparently, as far as I could gather, said, please email the author and tell her what you think of the book, that kind of thing. So it was a humbling moment for me as a writer. What was interesting about this is that the title of this poem is called Dear Amy, and it's A-M-Y, which is not how my name is spelled. And then Nizuki Yami Tatutil, and there's 6 O's in my last name as they wrote it, but there was actually not a single O in my last name at all. And in order to get my work email, to actually send me a work email, it's my entire last name at Fredonia at EDU, so that's what kind of cracked me up. They had to get it right to send it, but during the actual email, they added 6 O's to my last name. So I just love that moxie. Like, I don't even care. It just sounds like this. So this is a found poem comprised entirely of lines from high school students, from their emails. All I did was break the lines. Dear Amy Nizuki Yami Tatutil, if I were to ask you a question about your book and sum it up into one word, it would be, why? I think I like Walt Whitman better than you. I don't get literature, but for a fast 30-minute read, your book takes the cake. Are you going to get a rude reaction when you meet that one guy in that one poem? I guess you never know. You are young. You are so young. You are so very young. You are so young to be a poet. I like how your poems take up an entire page because it makes our reading assignments go faster. In class, we spend so much time dissecting your poems and then deeply analyzing them. Sorry, I think I like Walt Whitman better than you. But don't take offense. You're kind of okay. You are young. You are young and pure, and you seem like you just really want to have a good time. Thank you. We have taken a debate, and you are a far better poet than Walt Whitman. And I loved how your poems were easy to read and understand. Hi, my name is Alicia. We read your book, and I just loved it. We also read Leaves of Grass. There was no competition. I liked Leaves of Grass a lot better. But yours was a really good read. Poetry's not my favorite type of literature, and sometimes I'm out for drinks and guys try to talk to me, and sometimes I just brush it off and keep dancing. Every once in a while, the creepy mean guys try to offer me things, and then they say something. I was wondering, what would you do? True, that's all true. Lastly, I was wondering if you ever wrote a poem that didn't really have a deeper meaning, but everyone tried to give it one anyways. Sorry, I'm really sorry. Sorry, Walt Whitman is better than you. So yeah, that was a humbling day in my... The first year I was married, I envisioned this kind of great summer of being newlyweds, that kind of thing. My husband, I had never lived with my husband before. We got married, and so this was our first time just living with another person. Moved into this great little house, a very cute neighborhood, and then it turned out that there was some shady dealings going on with our neighbors, and that wasn't me being judgy. The police actually mounted a camera, asked to mount a camera on our roof to monitor the goings. It turns out actually there was a active meth lab next door, and and the thing is, this was run by by a very, very geriatric, sweet, sweet couple. They'd come out and give me vegetables from their garden. Amy, here you go, make a pie or whatever, that kind of thing. And our houses were close enough together so that the minute they went indoors, they had the worst sailor mouth ever. So it would be just like, you stupid blah, blah, whore, blah, blah, blah. And just, things that would just make me cringe when I was sitting there just trying to eat my cereal. And I could hear them fighting and arguing and that kind of thing. So that was going on one side. And on the other side, the headquarters of the Arachnid Society of Chautauqua County bought the house next door. So it was all hours of the night. People with spider problems would bring their spiders or tarantulas over. They'd take walks with them on leashes in front of our house. You can't even make. And so my husband, I'm sure, was just thinking, like, what did I get myself into? And so there's that. That same month, the same month we were married in New York City, I heard this on NPR, and I looked it up this morning just to make sure so I wasn't just giving you wrong information. A man, I don't know how many of you have watched that TV show Hoarders or anything like that. Yeah, a few Hoarders. So this is pre-Hoarders. But a man from New York City called 911 himself and asked to be rescued from his apartment that was overrun with 1,014 rats. So it just got me thinking, what was it about that 1,000th and 14th rat that just sent him over the edge? Like, I need help now, that kind of thing. So I stirred all of this up into a poem, and it's called Baked Goods. Flour on the floor makes my sandals slip, and I tumble into your arms. Too hot to bake this morning, but blueberries begged me to fold them into moist muffins. Sticks of rhubarb plotted a whole pie. The windows are blown open, and a thick fruit tang sneaks through the wire screen and into the home of the scowly couple who lives next door. Yesterday, a man in the city was rescued from his apartment, overrun with thousands of rats. Something about being angry because he let his pet python refused to eat. He just let the bloom of fur rise over the gnarly blue rug, rise over the coffee table, rise over the kitchen countertops, and pip through each cabinet, snip at the stumpy paper bags of sugar and the cylinders of salt. Our kitchen, love, is a riot of pots, wooden spoons, and melted butter. So be it. Maybe all this baking will quiet the angry voices next door, if only for a brief whiff. I want our summers to always be like this, a kitchen wrecked with love, a table overflowing with baked goods warming the already warm air. And after all the pots are stacked, all the goodies cooled, and all the counters wiped clean, let us never, ever be rescued from this mess. Those of you who are parents in the audience know that sometimes there's this unspoken kind of weird competition that takes place about kind of children's milestones, like, my baby first started talking at 12 months, or my kid started roller skating at 6 months, or, that kind of thing. And I never really wanted to participate in that, but I started getting nervous, and I wish I could kind of go back to the new mother I was 4 years ago, because I was so nervous. My son took a little bit longer than usual to speak, to first say his first words. And so, well-meaning friends would be like, you might want to have him tested, or he seems really quiet and withdrawn. And so, the overachiever, it was just making me very stressed. My mom was always kind of on me, why is he not talking? And now I'm happy to say that, wow, I just missed those days where he was very, very quiet. He's a happy, chatty, vibrant vocabulary on this boy who just 2 hours ago was asking if he was allowed, because his father wasn't letting him, if he was allowed to watch some jellyfish videos on YouTube. So anyway, so I wanted to put that into context. But at the time, it was a very kind of scary, dark time for me. And there was, just the weird kind of pressure that other mothers, I found, place on each other. So this is called Waiting for Him to Speak. Sometimes she squints, like the queen whose crown was too heavy for her head. Sometimes she sighs, and the sigh is a pin of wind through his hair, and his hair is the tobacco hue of an owl feather. She repeats colors, her name, his name, points out cats and birds in his chunky books, and he studies them close, but is silent. Because of these books, she imagines daily what it would be like if she were a mama owl and he were her owlet, or if she were a cat and he were her quiet kitty. These are her thoughts now, not about what color of high heels she will wear to the party next week, or the key code of a house once given to her by a married man. Now she reads her son books about elephants on a bike, hippos wearing pajamas, and about more owls who seem to have gotten themselves lost. There are only about 500 whooping cranes left on this planet, 300 California condors, and just over 6,000 or so beach mice. During the months that she waits for him to talk, there will be even less of these animals. She feels guilty for waiting, for wanting it so badly. And by the time you get to the end of this poem, there will actually be no more pygmy rabbits left on this earth. The last one will die as she waits for her son to speak. The nights are loose, long braids that unravel at the ends. But he will have his books. He will always have his books. And the last one I'm going to read is a Carmina Figurata poem, which is a fancy way of saying a concrete poem. The poem itself is shaped in the form of, in the shape of what the poem is about. So, for food Carmina Figurata poems, the poem itself is in the shape of a food. The assignment I gave was to write about your favorite food, and I chose spare ribs, which are my favorite food. And so these are. This poem is written in the shape of 2 ribs. Why I crave ribs tonight. Baby, don't even come near me with that napkin. Just let me at each bone, slick and sweet with smoky sugar sauce. See all the steam when I nudge the meat off with my tongue? It's the only kind of cloud we see this lemonade day in June. All this driving, and I need to feel food in my hands. No knife or fork tonight. I want to burn my lips just enough, but not too much it hurts to kiss. And that reminds me of the glowing heart inside of me, how each rib curves around and locks tight in neat snaps along the back. Make your hand like that around my small wrist and lead me into the bathroom. Stand with me in the shower and feel the tender spot just underneath my ribs. Lift my hands above my head and trace the space bone, space bone, space bone, space bone down my sides with a blue bar of soap. Let this be the only way I will ever come clean. Thank you. We have some time for questions if people want to ask questions. I know some of you already asked them, but as I always say to my classes, no question is too big, no question is too small. Who wants to throw something out there?
I'll start me.
Okay.
I've been to see you at Fredonia, at SUNY Fredonia, and walking through the halls of Fredonia with Amy is like walking with Taylor Swift through a song everybody loves. So you teach a lot of students and you give them a lot. And then you go around the country often doing reading. And you're very, very productive. You've written a lot of books. I'm wondering how solitude fits into, and you have 2 young children who are beautiful and a very handsome husband. All the I've seen in life.
I'll be sure to tell my husband that. Yeah.
Very handsome. But what I'm wondering is how does solitude work? Because poets need to refill that well. They need to daydream. A poet, Ahmad Johnson, talked about that being the biggest leap from poet to parent is the loss of daydreaming.
Sure.
Where do you do it? Where do you get the breaths? Talk about that.
Good question. I do have a very full life, one that I'm really kind of proud of, and it's a lot of work to kind of keep full and active, that kind of thing. I very much want to be an active parent, that kind of thing, and I also want to be a pleasant friend to be around with, that kind of thing, and also a teacher who's not just kind of being halfway in the classroom, that kind of thing. So it has been, I'm not going to, the real deal of this is that many times at night I'm brushing my teeth after a long, full day and thinking, I had 3 ideas for a poem today, and I have no idea what they are. That's usually what my kind of day is like, kind of in some ways. I do, though, and there's no set schedule, and I know there's some people who have amazing times who can find a way to just make it to the computer, make it to the desk every day. I think whenever I try to do that, that's when the self-loathing comes in, because there's going to be something that happens. Literally, and this is not even, I can't even make this stuff up. The day I was supposed to leave here for Ames, I have this kind of quiet cuddle time with my 4-year-old while my husband takes care of my youngest in the morning to let us sleep in a little bit. So that morning I was telling him, I'm going to be leaving soon, but you're going to have a great time watching jellyfish videos, that kind of thing. He's literally like, Mommy, I don't feel so good. And I was like, how do I leave, at that point? On the other hand, the reality of it is I cannot wait to leave, in some ways. And it's not because, I don't, and anybody who's seen me with my son knows that is the apple of my eye. But on the other hand, I think it's very important to find that kind of, but to know when you absolutely need to be present, that kind of thing. And of course, I didn't just ditch my sick son, that kind of thing. I very much stayed put until I knew he was okay and helped out my husband, that kind of thing. But I also know that I would not be as good of a mom or as good of a wife or as good of a friend if I didn't take that time away and have, say, a week or so at a writing retreat or something like that. This year was the first year I didn't apply out to a writing retreat, and so I kind of made my own. Thankfully, I'm blessed with a very understanding husband who's a writer, who's also very handsome, as Dean said. But and so he kind of knows. He knows an unhappy Amy is in an unhappy family as well. And so some of my writer friends who are all educators as well. There's a colony called the Malay Colony up in upstate New York. They have this wonderful program for people who just kind of who don't have time for a full month residency. I don't think I could be away kind of for that long from my family. But for a week, you can kind of rent out the space and just have that kind of solitude and that quiet time. I work late into the night. That's something I don't really necessarily envision, but it's just, I feel like as long as all of those pieces are kind of actively, as long as I'm kind of actively being present in all of those pieces, then I feel full. Even if I feel harried, I feel full. It's the times when I think, I have to spend all this time because I have deadlines on XYZ writing. That's when the self-loathing comes in, because I think I'm such a horrible mom, Or conversely, spending so much time with whatever kids or friends or whatever, then I think, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible writer. No one's going to know who I am, that kind of thing. So there's no kind of easy answer except for the fact that for each individual person, you have to find ways to make yourself feel full. And then I think the success will come. I think, and however you define that success. So to me, success is knowing, when my kids are sick, they call out still for me, for Mommy, even though I'm the one that's kind of away the most, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a roundabout answer, but yeah, it's a great question. Great question. I'm tired a lot. People say it'll get better, but I don't know. I have a very active 19-month-old, and he's the one that kind of takes up my energy right now, but I wouldn't change it also for the world. So, and when I was in grad school and single, at the time I thought I was so busy, that kind of thing, and and I was it was very different, but that's also important. I also know friends in grad school who were dealing with taking care of their older parents or whatever, so for everybody it's different, there has to be just finding a way to kind of make yourself feel full and active in all of those pieces. Yeah. Other questions? It doesn't have to be big, too. It could be really small and superficial, anything. Yeah.
It's so nice to hear all the stories about, what went into the origin of the poem. Sort of that for example, the one poem where you have those neighbors were problematic. And then to hear sort of how little of it actually goes into the poem. Can you say a little bit about kind of how that starts for you? When you know you have enough critical mass that you have a poem started out of these disparate pieces, and then how you figure out what to resolve.
Yeah. I talked a little bit earlier. Someone asked kind of about what is my mindset when I sit down to write, either longhand or at the computer. I never set out to say, oh, this is going to be a love poem, or oh, this is going to be a poem about nature, or that kind of thing. But what happens for me, the poem always starts with an image that I can't get out of. So it's not just a visual image, but a scent or a sound, that kind of thing. And I love that. Actually, you kind of answered it in some ways when you say that critical mass. I love that description there. It's like this kind of very dynamic, kind of bubbling or overflowing pasta pot of ideas, and that's when I know, okay, kids need to go to a babysitter for a minute, or husband needs to kind of figure out dinner on his own, or whatever, and then I need to get to the computer. But it always starts for me, I'm always in awe of people who say, I'm going to write about XYZ, and I have the title already, I just need to write the poem. I just don't work that way. It's always starting with an image, or news sources, that kind of thing, to kind of trigger something that I wanted to write about, and that was the first poem I ever wrote as a married woman. And I didn't know that, I'm going to sit down today and write my first poem as a married woman, a love poem to my husband. And that was not my intention at all. But it was that critical mass of just concentrated images of hearing the swear words, just picturing in my mind these 1,000 rats running over the countertops, and then the actual very real reality of my kitchen always being a wreck because I'm baking all the time. So very much so. And I keep, actually going back to Dean's original question, is that, so I may not always get to the desk every day, but I'm always writing in what I call it an image journal, that kind of thing. So I have either a line or a snippet, and to me, if I can get one image down, that's a good day, that kind of thing. Obviously, there's better days than others, but to me, that's all kind of writing, so that I never know if that story about the rats in New York City is ever going to make it. But 2 years down the road, 2 months down the road, 2 days down the road, it might, that kind of thing. But I find, especially now, with all the things I'm juggling, if I don't get it down, I will completely forget it, that kind of thing. Melanie Ray Tone is actually the one who first introduced the concept of an image journal to me, and it's something I've still been doing since grad school. Other things? Yeah.
I read that poem Boosh over and over again. Why was the fish lucky?
Boosh, why was the fish lucky is the question. It's kind of one of those questions, I don't want to be like, figure it out on your own, but kind of figure it out on your own. I will say this, so maybe just to kind of just alter the question just a little bit. The title of my latest collection is Lucky Fish. That's kind of, and what I will say is that's kind of that's me. That's kind of what I felt at the time when I was compiling the process. My first 2 books were celebrations of life, and the second one was very much a celebration of life, but exploring the darkness in nature and the not-so-pretty parts of nature, that kind of thing. And so for this third book, it really was very much a joyful kind of testament. It's kind of my love letter to life, as cheesy as that sounds. But for a poet to say that, that's really risky. I don't have an angsty bone in my body in some ways, and I don't also have a cool bone, I think, probably. And I'm definitely the cheesiest poet, that you'll ever meet. And I'm aware of that. So take all of this with a grain of salt. But that was the kind of the overall arching, that's the only kind of testament I can give to just the luck and the blessedness that I felt at that point in my life. So for me, the symbol of the lucky fish, and do you guys know this plastic little fortune fish that they give out sometimes at Chinese restaurants? I thought I had some more, and I didn't. I usually give them out at readings. It's a plastic red fish. Have you seen these? You put them in the palm of your hand, and then according to body heat, it moves or wiggles in a certain way. So if it stays put, that means you will die soon. But if it wiggles a certain way, you'll find new love, or you'll get a new fortune if it flips over, that kind of thing. So I just kind of, I don't know. So I was kind of working with all of those themes of what is true luck and what is fate, what is destiny, how much of it do you make your own, that kind of thing by the choices that you make. Those are all kind of large objects that any poet kind of would cringe to kind of talk about their own work that way. But that's kind of my total evasion of the question. But I will say that Lucky Fish is a stand-in for just kind of the persona of Amy, as close as it can be. Okay, that's fine. That's great. That's great. Good question.
How
wrote your first poem?
Oh, I was writing some dreadful haiku, I don't know if I'd even call that, like literally, and this is how sad the state of poetry was in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. It won a contest, but here was my haiku. It was called Rainbow, but the actual words of the haiku was literally the colors of the rainbow. So it'd be like red, orange, yellow, and I think I cut one color because it didn't fit the 575, and that won! So I cringed to even think that was even considered poetry then, but and it was very much. I think because so many people made fun of me for that I immediately was like, poetry, forget it. So it was kind of, and I didn't really ever return to it until my junior year in college. It was quite by happenstance. I think if you were here this afternoon, it was very much an accident. I was a fledgling chemistry major, struggling over an organic chemistry lab in my honors dormitory study hall, and someone had left a poem on the desk, and I didn't even know that it was a poem. That's how divorced I was from just literature, really, in general. But it knocked my socks off. It took my breath away. Literally, I gasped when I read it, and it's the poem "Mint Snowball" by Naomi Shihab Nye. Those of you who know her work, I didn't know what it was, so I tacked it up to the bulletin board and said, "Whose handout is this? Please see Amy in room whatever, that kind of thing." And the guy who had left it in the study lounge had said, "Yeah, that was mine. It's called a poem," that kind of. I asked him, "What class is this? Can I go with you to this class?" Just basically to shadow him. So I skipped my lab that I wasn't completed anyway. Skipped my lab and sat in on a poetry workshop. I didn't even know that a poetry workshop existed, really, that kind of thing. My high school poetry education was very much considered the teacher has the key and we have to unlock it. And every noun was a symbol of something. And if you didn't know that symbol, then you were just a loser, that kind of thing. So I sat in on that poetry workshop, and it changed my life. It literally changed my life. And that poetry workshop director or leader ended up directing what would be my thesis in grad school. David Citino, who's no longer with us, but he took pity on this fledgling chemistry major and said that I could shadow and sit down and audit his class. And the next semester, I switched my major so that I could do it. So that's why earlier I said I just always felt so behind, and I always had to read, so I could name drop these poets that people were calling out as well. So it felt very late to me in some ways, because I have a lot of organic chemistry kind of background, and poetry still, and I like that though. I still feel like I'm a student of poetry, so I don't want that to ever stop, actually. So yeah. Other things.
What did your parents say when you switched your major?
Oh yeah, the proverbial stuff hit the fan, basically. I was destined. My mother was the first doctor in her Philippine village in northern Luzon. It was my destiny to be the second doctor, that kind of thing. They had put in the Philippines, in this village, they have giant plaques that for doctors. It's so no other profession, but so that'll say like Dr. Paz F. Salino, Doctora, blah blah blah, the year that she graduated medical school, that kind of thing. My name was already pencil, not pencil, because it withstood rain. It wasn't permanent, but it was already like in place to be the next one once I had committed to Ohio State's pre-med program. So the pressure was on. This was like the family compound of hundreds of years, that kind of thing. All my life, whenever someone would ask the little 2-year-old, "What do you want to be?" or that kind of thing, I would say doctor, just mimicking, essentially. My mom is still my greatest hero, that kind of thing. I wanted to be her, But then when I told them, first I changed my major before I ever told them. And then I sat them down one day when I was visiting home from college and said, "Look, you guys always asked me, to do the thing in life that you felt empty without, and it was literature for me," and stuff like that. And they were like, "Literature," and then swearing in their native languages, Tagalog for my mom and swear words from Malayalam for my dad, and it's just a cacophony of swear words. because I think they really thought I was going to be on the corner of Times Square with an empty cup saying, failed poet, that kind of thing. Please give to me. But you know what, now, so fast forward, so they finally, I don't know, fast forward 5-6 months, they finally got on board. And then ultimately now it's ridiculous. They're my greatest fans. Anytime anything is published or reviewed or anything like that, they're the first to make a copy and tack it on their little retirement center in Florida, hey, look at my daughter. When my books come out, it's embarrassing. It's totally embarrassing. So there's a happy ending to that, too. But I will tell you this, though. After this happened, all of my cousins kind of defected. We were all supposed to be doctors or attorneys, that kind of thing. So now I have someone who's a social worker, an elementary school teacher, lots of humanities, that kind of thing. I was the first, and it was a really, really difficult position to be in because my parents left their countries so that their daughter could have a great medical education. And then to say, well, I wanted to have a poetry education was just not really even on their radar at all. Not even on the radar of their radar, that kind of thing. Yeah, good. I think that's a good place to end. So thank you so much. Thanks.